In 2010, you could allegedly rent the entire country of Liechtenstein for $70,000 a night. Now, if we had to calculate the rental for 12 months, that would come to over $25.5 million. Turns out that was a hoax, but it got us thinking. Imagine someone wanted to purchase the whole country. What sort of costs would be involved? We're about to find out in today's video. How much would it cost to buy your own country? The reality of buying a country. Buying a country is the same as buying a business. You expect to fork out a decent sum of money up front, but down the line, you want to make a profit. With that information in hand, purchasing a country like Zimbabwe versus purchasing a country like New Zealand will have drastically different price tags. If you preferred, you could purchase an uninhabited island, which you could build up to attract people. It would cost a fortune to convert a legit, governable country. You might prefer to build a new island of your own, which would entail hauling in millions of tons of concrete, and you'd need a few $100 billion to spare. Any business person would make sure they've considered all the pros and cons before they purchase or build. So, now let's look at the factors that need to be considered before deciding on the purchase offer price of a country. Location, location, location. Hey Luxers, we all know the value of location. It's like the golden rule of real estate. So depending on where you buy, purchasing your own country could either cost an arm and a leg, or just a leg. Cayman Islands, for example, is the most expensive country in the world to live in according to World Population Review, while the cheapest country is Pakistan. Now, consider the liabilities of the country in question. Let's continue using Pakistan and the Cayman Islands as examples. The Cayman Islands has an estimated population of 64,420 people, which works out to around 549 people per square mile. Pakistan has 225 million people, with 742 people per square mile. The size of Pakistan is 340,509 square miles, compared to Cayman Islands at only 102 square miles. Over time, which country is going to be more of a cost burden? And that is Pakistan. So while the initial price of Pakistan would be considerably more affordable than the Cayman Islands, it may end up costing much more than the Cayman Islands in the long run. Now, if you were to start your own island, consider that you'd need to have a large marketing budget to attract the right kind of people to live, work, and build your island into a country with a financially viable currency in order to become a top player among other countries. Natural resources. A huge influencing factor on the cost of your country would be what natural resources are available. According to Basic Planet, Russia has the lion's share of natural resources. Because Russia is so large, it sprawls across coal, timber, and gold reserves. The value of Russia's natural resources is valued around $75.5 trillion. So before you've even taken other factors into consideration, when purchasing Russia, you'd need $75.5 trillion at least in the bank. Basic Planet further affirms that the country with the least availability to natural resources is Vatican City. They struggle with their lack of coal reserves, and natural gas is non-existent. The country has no oil reserves, precious metals, gold, or silver. However, Vatican City is a well-run first-world country, albeit super tiny, with a ton of history and art, so the asking price of this independent state would be considerably high, despite its lack of natural resources. Now, let's compare that to Liberia in West Africa. This country is rich in natural resources, such as iron ore, timber, diamonds, gold, and hydropower, yet they're still a third-world country. The nation has been plagued by civil war, which only ended in 2003. They were hit hard by Ebola. An embargo on timber imports, implemented in 2003 by the UN, crippled the domestic forestry sector, and despite being lifted 3 years later, has meant a slow recovery for that industry. Now, Aluxers, do you think this purchase would be good value for money? It could be, depending on whether or not you are able to get those natural resources making money for you. And if you were looking to buy an island to convert into your own country, what natural resources would that island have to offer? Now let's look at some finance. GDP. How healthy is your country's economy? Is it growing, or is it experiencing a never-ending recession? Would you want to pump your money into a country that hasn't shown financial growth in years? Or would you consider paying a far greater price for a country whose economy continues an upward trend? According to Focus Economics, it's predicted the U.S. will remain the world's largest economy with an expected nominal GDP forecast for 2024 in the region of $25.3 trillion. How would you attract people to your new country? Would they help finance your country? Who would you trade with, and what would you trade? Would you accept refugees who escape their own country, or would you only consider people with a minimum predetermined bank balance? These are all questions to consider when you're drawing up your business plan to purchase your own country. And now on to infrastructure. Aluxers, every country needs infrastructure. That's Country 101. A country needs water, electricity, telecommunications, roads, schools, hospitals, and houses. To build a world-class hospital with cancer and psychiatric treatment facilities, fully furnished with 450 beds, that would cost in the region of $1 billion. And that's just one hospital. Then, who will you get to work in those hospitals? What costs would be involved in attracting other like-minded business people to invest in your hospital, which in turn pays for the salary of your staff? As you can see, your $1 billion hospital has costs that continue to rise. If you were to purchase an island, don't forget to factor in the costs of having everything flown or shipped in because you're completely cut off from the outside world. And if you'd prefer to buy a country with infrastructure in place, it'll cost a decent sum. Let's take a small country like Denmark, for example. Say we pick one building from Denmark, like the Concerthuset. The Concerthuset cost almost $300 million to build. If you decide to purchase a small country like Denmark, you'd have to pay for the already existing infrastructure, and just one building alone is $300 million. That's not taking into account the roads, train tracks, bridges, airports, ferry routes, telecommunications, power lines and grids, windmills, power plants, schools for all ages, universities, hospitals, malls, parks. Look, Aluxers, we could go on and on. You understand that these costs are just rising higher and higher. And it doesn't stop there because now it's time to feed the people. Farming. Let's say you bought an island and you needed to get produce growing. If your island was filled with hydrophobic soil, you'd have an enormous task on your hands converting that soil to become hydrophilic. This is not an overnight process, and until the soil is healthy and nourished, your people will have nothing fresh to eat. You need to bring a team of people onto your island to start working on the land while importing fresh produce for them to live off of while they prepare the soil. If you opted to buy a country that's already established with their farming, then a smaller country like South Africa would be far more affordable than purchasing China, for example. China has 7% arable land, which feeds 22% of their nation. And according to Tractor Junction, China is also the largest rice-producing country in the world. The nation's also a large producer of soybeans, sorghum, wheat, millet, and corn. The World Bank confirms that South Africa has nearly 10% arable land, with barley, maize, oats, sorghum, and wheat being the most farmed products. Exports include citrus, wine, corn, and wool, along with nuts, sugar, mohair, apples, and pears. China is far greater in size, therefore exports would bring in more revenue and your purchase would yield greater income than South Africa over time. But you would be working far harder. What you also need to consider is that exporting from China would cost a lot less than exporting from South Africa, which is much further away from regular transport routes. Military. Look, we all hope we'd never have to deploy a military, but it's a reality that can't be ignored. In 2020, the U.S. spent $778 billion on its military alone. That equated to 39% of the total military spending worldwide that year, according to Statista.com. In comparison, according to ABC.net, Australia will spend $270 billion building a larger military to prepare for a poorer, more dangerous world and a rise of China. However, before this was put forward, they had only spent $38.7 billion in their 2019-20 budget. Worldwide, $1.98 trillion was spent on the military in 2020. Your own island country would need some form of defense system in place because, like any sound-minded business person, you would need to protect your assets. Government. Now, who is going to run your country? Are you going to be responsible for every facet of your country, or are you going to employ people to do it for you? Not only do you need to have your country run like a well-oiled machine, but you would need to work on international relations. And if you're a new country, those need to be established from scratch, which, when compared to some international relations of established countries, might leave you better off. If purchasing an already functioning country, you'd need to spend a large portion of your budget on maintaining good international relationships and working on the image of your own country. The Pew Research Center reported that America's image has plummeted over the past few months due to the country's poor handling of the coronavirus. If that was your country, you'd need to hire some expensive PR people to come and put things back on track. So, in conclusion, according to research done by economist William D. Larson, as reported by USA Today, buying the land of the USA would cost $23 trillion. According to the article, placing an accurate dollar value on America's land, from natural features such as rivers and mountains to developed lands that include farms and skyscrapers, is virtually impossible. And it's the same for buying any country, whether it already exists or you're going to establish it from scratch. If we had to pick a figure, we'd leave it at $1 trillion for a small country purchase and $50 trillion for a larger country purchase. That way, you've covered all your bases and you've got a little left over for a rainy day. So, Aluxers, what do you think is a reasonable price tag to put on purchasing your own country? We'd love your feedback on this one. Thanks for watching. We really hope you enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to subscribe, as we have plenty more for you. And if you enjoyed today's, please leave us a like. We so appreciate it.